The Weeknd is an artist that has paved the way for the R&B and pop sound in music, and becoming one of, if not, the biggest artist of all time. He has won so many awards, released some of the most acclaimed albums of its time, and has had so many comparisons to the likes of the Michael Jackson. Even for more casual listeners, you can tell how amazing his more popular songs are. It's a case where, yeah, it's popular, but it's also just really good. And that's what The Weeknd is best known for. He has a great balance of having a captivating sound for more mainstream listeners, while having a unique sense of storytelling for more hardcore listeners. And he just so happens to be my top 5 favorite artists of all time. So today, I'm going to take the time to rank all of his 10 projects. This will include his 6 studio albums, his famous mixtape trilogy, and his My Dear Melancholy EP. Stuff like the Idol soundtrack won't be included, cause I don't want to get into that topic yet. And the Noise EP from 2009 won't be included due to the fact that it's unreleased material. But don't think I don't know about it. So with that out of the way, let's get into ranking every single The Weeknd project. Really not that surprising that this is considered to be the weakest for some people. But even with that, it's still a good project. It's just not substantial enough. 2018's My Dear Melancholy is Abel's only EP in his entire discography. It isn't bad by any means, I mean it is The Weeknd after all. But this project just doesn't really have a concrete narrative and big enough substance compared to his other projects. 6 songs for a 21-minute long EP is pretty expectable. It's just not meant to be able to have a big story. I can understand where Abel is coming from with this project, as even though he didn't put a ton of effort with this project, he has a lot of connection with it, and he even says it's his favorite project on Go With Complex. But to me, a lot of songs kind of came and went, and I find it hard to try to remember some significant moments. But this is obviously better than nothing. Or this. My top 3 were definitely the hardest for this project, but I'll go with Call On My Name, Wasted Times, and I Was Never There. This album is where a lot of people first discovered The Weeknd, myself included, although for completely different reasons. 2015 saw the release of Beauty Behind the Madness, his second studio album. This one strays away from some R&B elements and has some pop elements included. After coming from the success of the trilogy in Kissland, this album shows Abel's progression as a songwriter and using more unique sounds, ranging from either energetic, somber, depressing, or even straight freaky. It shows off a lot of his versatility in his singing and some rapping in some parts. It's also the album where it feels like it's trying to be more mainstream and have The Weeknd's name be talked about more often, ironically. And it also brought a lot more attention to The Weeknd for new fans. I feel like this is a really good introduction to getting used to The Weeknd's sound, while also sounding different for more hardcore listeners. That is a good balance that I really appreciate in this album. My top 3 on this album are Tell Your Friends, Can't Feel My Face, and The Hills. At this point, The Weeknd has made a pretty big name for himself in terms of his sound. He has started to be in the conversation of being one of the most influential R&B singers of all time currently. But in 2016, he done something not a lot of people were happy about in the end. First off, he cut off his hair. Second, got rid of his past. And lastly, reinvent his sound. That is how Starboy was created, and at the time, people weren't happy. Like, at all. Shifting away from his natural R&B sound and bringing in more mainstream pop in the mix. And let me say, it isn't that bad as people say it is. Sure, it may not be the usual sound that he's mostly used to, but let me say this. The one thing that makes The Weeknd so unique is that he's able to make songs so simple, yet so captivating, that even some of his most popular songs are well received. That's something not a lot of artists can do correctly. This is basically Beauty Behind the Madness again, but more cohesive and far more vibrant. It's catchy, energetic, and super fun. I think it was kind of the right thing to evolve and rebrand his sound for his album, and it totally at all isn't a large ego trip about his newly found success. Oh wait, my top 3 on this album are Sidewalks, Die For You, and Reminder. The ability to replicate your sound professionally when making a debut album may seem a bit challenging, but The Weeknd pulled it off in the end. His 2013 debut studio album, Kissland, once again sees Abel in a world that seems similar to the trilogy, but it's much larger atmosphere-wise. The aesthetic is really eye-pleasing and helps stand out with a lot of other albums at that time. Abel describes Kissland as a really terrifying place he thought of, being inspired by horror movies. He's in a world where he's living in his newly found success, but it's filled with nothing but lust and harsh consequences. On surface level, it may be somewhat interesting, but it gets darker the further you progress. It has such a dark tone, but then again, it's really deceiving, which gives a lot of its charm. Not quite on the level like House of Balloons or the trilogy, but it's still a really good experience with a charming atmosphere. My top 3 on this album are Tears in the Rain, Kissland, and Wanderlust. Coming off of the massive success of After Hours, people were wondering what album was going to follow that next, especially part of a new trilogy, and what they got was nothing that they were expecting. 2022 saw the official sequel to After Hours, Dawn FM, taking in a completely different style from its predecessor. This album takes a bit more of a dance pop production, similar to songs you would hear in the 80s, and Abel works it off well despite it being another style he hasn't tested with that much. Concept-wise, it's treated as a radio station, 103.5 Dawn FM, narrated by none other than Jim Carrey, which is amazing to see him on an album like this. The story seems to find Abel in a stage of purgatory, taking place after what happened in After Hours, but more info later. The poem that Jim says at the end of the album summarizes the album's meaning. It's a journey of one's soul where it decides to go, hence with the atmosphere combined with its setting. On top of that, it looks back on what it has done, while making its choices by itself in this empty void. Now, the songs themselves feel like flashbacks, which makes sense with the type of feeling these songs go for lyric-wise, and the aesthetic is really pleasing in general. This has one of my favorite sounds in the Weeknd album, and while it's good, the anticipation kinda wore off coming from the juggernaut that was After Hours. Here, it feels more like a reflection piece before the big finale, which would become a Hurry Up Tomorrow. But overall, it's still a nice time. My top 3 on this album are Is There Someone Else, Less Than Zero, and Out of Time. The Weeknd's trilogy is arguably discussed as one of, if not the most influential compilations of all time. The eerie sound that never takes a break and intensifies, the story that keeps you entertained, and most importantly, the Weeknd himself. Being compiled as 3 early mixtapes, I thought it was fair to put 2011's Echoes of Silence as the weakest mixtape in comparison. First off, at this point in the story, The Weeknd has finally become the person he always wanted to become for so many years. A world-renowned superstar where you couldn't escape any conversation without him being mentioned all the time. But because he's found his new success, his toxicity never leaves him. And in the case of this mixtape, is when he finally realizes his wrongdoings. It's basically another love story, where this girl first left him because she thought he was a nobody before. But when he finds that success, she comes back to him, and the usual happens. Drugs, sex, lust, yeah, pretty much the typical stuff at this point. But it feels off. He knows that girls only want him because he's the next big thing. Eventually, the whole story ends when Abel finally says, "Hey, I can't be with you." He realizes all the wrong he has been doing. After what he experienced before in the trilogy, it clicks. As a standalone mixtape, it's super solid, but as a finale to a legendary trilogy, it succeeds at what it does correctly in every way. It really is an amazing project. My top 3 on this mixtape are The Fall, Montreal, and EXO/The Host. This song, was made for EXO fans. Once again, the trilogy is renowned to be a revolutionary project for R&B, and I won't say anything new from the previous section, but you pretty much know what I mean. However, this time, the mixtape in this section gives us a closer experience with a lot more context and personal conflict on the Weeknd's actions. 2011's Thursday is basically what happens directly whenever someone ends up in a relationship with Abel. It follows a girl with an actual name this time, Valerie, but it's actually just Abel's voice pitched up, which seems kinda smart. She seeks interest in Abel, but there's a catch. She's only available on one day every week, that being Thursday. It may seem fine, but it's much more manipulated than it sounds. On any other day of the week, he doesn't even care for Valerie at all. Only on Thursdays is when it's the most prevalent. Hence the nickname Lonely Star, where Abel is there physically, but never there mentally. Then, he tells her not to fall in love with him after all that they have been through, then starts to regret what happens after that. Case in point, The Birds Part 2. So, yeah, it's messed up, but then again, it doesn't matter because he already got the success he wanted afterwards. He doesn't seem to care anymore, which turns into a transition to the next mixtape. Thursday is amazing, simply due to the fact that the project gives us a much more insight on what it feels like to be with someone like Abel. It's just the added context that can make a story section super memorable, even if it's in the middle of the trilogy. My top 3 on this mixtape are Lonely Star, The Birds Part 1, and Heaven or Las Vegas. If there is an album so well crafted that it closes off an entire legacy, it will most definitely be this one right here. Serving as one of my favorite albums of 2025, Hurry Up Tomorrow serves as a finale to Abel's modern trilogy, as well as being the final album under the Weeknd name. And I don't think I've ever been this excited for an album like this in a bit. He finally closes out his legacy, which kind of feels like a full circle moment. I've been following the Weeknd for a really long time, and to see him release his final album is cool to see. The album itself, man, he really nailed it. It feels exactly how it sounds for a closure album like this. The album takes place after Dawn FM, where we see the Weeknd leaving purgatory and ascending in the afterlife, while also repenting for his sins, leaving the Weeknd behind for good, before finally becoming Abel Tesfaye. It has a fantastic mix of an introspective look on this legacy, while also carrying psychological horror elements in the modern trilogy. It's everything that I wanted for a new Weeknd album like this, especially with this being the final one. The movie though, yeah, that's a discussion for another time. But I will say, the contrast between the album's review score and the movies is pretty epic if I'm not gonna lie. Enough of that. Hurry Up Tomorrow is an album that I could see aging like fine wine over time with its authenticity and its theatrical atmosphere. My top 3 on this album are Wake Me Up, Niagara Falls, and Hurry Up Tomorrow. Many people consider this album to be the magnum opus of his career. It all comes down to its intense and thrilling story with magnificent production. 2020's After Hours sees The Weeknd in a new era once again, but this time in a cinematic scale. Theming wise, it's the usual heartbreak topics that make an appearance once again, but in this album specifically, it focuses on 2 things: loneliness and straight up dying. The story sees Abel breaking up with a girl, but is having a hard time forgetting about it in this case because of his lavish lifestyle. He tries so hard that he even wants to escape LA, only to go back and do the usual because he's now heartless. But then, he gets into an overdose, gets into a coma, wakes up, finds his ex-lover with another man, gets jealous and repeats, "You don't love him," gets into his most vulnerable state of the album, and eventually runs out of blood. Nothing is left, and finally dies. His soul is now ascending to its next state, which would become Dawn FM. See what I mean? There is so much happening in the story that it may take a while to even think about its concept, and that's the genius design that this album holds. It's super fun for a casual listen, but dives much deeper the further you get invested. That is something that all the Weeknd's albums hold, but it's noticeably present in After Hours, and is probably the Weeknd's darkest story. My top 3 on this album are In Your Eyes, After Hours, and Heartless. Rapping Abel is objectively better, fight me. Out of all the projects Abel's released, my number one entry is something that truly explains everything. The start of not only his career, but the start to an influential trilogy. We have 2011's House of Balloons at the number one spot. This one mixtape sets the course for something that would last for over a decade. Not only is this the introduction to The Weeknd as a person, but introduces us to The Weeknd as a character. Literally, the very first line of this project is, "You don't know what's in store, but you know what you're here for," setting the stage for the type of person The Weeknd is. The House of Balloons is an actual place Abel once threw these parties, filled with drugs and alcohol, but in order to make it a bit more celebratory, they would often bring in balloons. This project describes not only Abel's intent and manipulation to this one girl, but what actually happens in this famous house. This goes on for a while, to the point where the girl ends up cheating on him, but that doesn't matter because in the end, he knows everything. Since we have already learned what happens in the other two parts, House of Balloons makes complete sense of why The Weeknd acts the way he does. If this project didn't act the way it did, then we wouldn't have gotten all the stories we would soon get if it wasn't for The Weeknd's troubled beginnings. House of Balloons is everything a debut project sets out to be in every way imaginable. Moody, intense, and most importantly, dark. My top 3 on this mixtape are House of Balloons / Glass Table Girls, The Party and the After Party, and my favorite Weeknd song of all time, Wicked Games. Man, what an experience I just went through. If you were to tell me that The Weeknd, out of all people, will become one of my favorite artists of all time, I would have believed you, because he definitely is. I have grown such a strong connection for his music because he can make something that casual listeners can enjoy with his accessible sound, but can become one of the best stories with enough exposure. There really isn't anyone else like The Weeknd. From his impressive vocal ranges to his creative versatility, this is who you call a superstar. I definitely had a lot more passion making this video because I just really enjoyed his music a lot. I like making videos like this. It allows me to reflect on a really special discography and just go over what each project has to offer. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do at this point. Make sure you follow my Instagram as I'm very active on there. And check out the group I'm in, Ref Gang, and subscribe to it as well. And as always, thank you for watching and have a good day.